Sarah Mitchell stared out the window of her Chicago high-rise apartment, watching the November rain streak down the glass like tears on her face. Below, the city lights flickered through the downpour, casting watery reflections on the wet pavement of Michigan Avenue. It was 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the apartment felt too quiet, too empty, despite being filled with all the trappings of their carefully constructed life. The stainless steel appliances in the kitchen gleamed under recessed lighting. The leather sectional sofa in the living room still held the faint impression of where Michael had sat that morning with his coffee and laptop before heading to his corporate finance job downtown. Their bedroom closet was neatly organized, her professional wardrobe on one side, his suits hanging precisely on the other. She turned away from the window and walked to the kitchen, her footsteps echoing slightly on the hardwood floors. The silence pressed in on her, a familiar companion these days. At 38, Sarah had achieved everything she thought she wanted: a successful career as a marketing director for a mid-sized tech company, a beautiful apartment in a desirable neighborhood, a husband who was kind, dependable, and financially secure. Michael was everything her parents had hoped for when they'd encouraged her to find a good man after college. He'd proposed on a beach in Destin, Florida, with a simple diamond ring that now felt heavier on her finger than it had 10 years ago. But something had been missing lately: a spark, a connection, a sense of being truly seen. The realization had crept up on her slowly, like the Chicago winters that seemed to last longer each year. She and Michael had fallen into comfortable routines: Sunday brunches at their favorite neighborhood spot, monthly movie nights, annual vacations to places like Colorado or Florida. Their conversations had become practical, discussing bills, household repairs, work deadlines, rather than the late-night philosophical debates that had characterized their early relationship. They still made love regularly, but it had become predictable, almost scheduled, lacking the fire and spontaneity of their 20s. Sarah had begun to wonder if this was just how marriage evolved with time, or if she was settling for comfort over passion. Her phone buzzed on the granite countertop, breaking her thoughts. A text from Michael: running late tonight. Big presentation tomorrow. Don't wait up. She typed back a simple "okay" before setting the phone down. This was their new normal, parallel lives intersecting at scheduled intervals. She poured herself a glass of Chardonnay, the pale liquid catching the light from the pendant lamps above the island. As she took a sip, she thought about the email that had arrived that afternoon, the one that had made her heart race for the first time in months. Sarah, we need someone reliable to represent the company at the Paris Tech Conference next month. Your French is still excellent, and you know our products inside and out. Budget approved, first-class tickets, 5-star hotel. Let me know by Friday. Her boss, Diane, had always recognized her potential, even when Sarah herself had started to doubt it. This was the opportunity she needed, a chance to prove herself professionally, to step out of the comfortable but increasingly suffocating routine of her daily life. And Paris, the thought sent a shiver down her spine. She hadn't been back since her junior year abroad at the Sorbonne, when everything felt possible and the future stretched before her like the Seine at dawn. Before Michael, before the safe choices, before she'd learned to temper her dreams with practicality. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the office early, the Chicago skyline still dark outside her floor-to-ceiling windows. Her sleek, modern office reflected her professional persona: minimalist furniture, abstract art on the walls, a desk organized with military precision. She spent the day preparing her presentation materials for the Paris conference, her French flowing more easily with each slide she created. By mid-afternoon, she'd convinced herself this was exactly what she needed: a professional challenge, a temporary escape, nothing more. "Hey, you actually look alive today," her colleague Lisa said, poking her head into Sarah's office. Lisa was everything Sarah wasn't: brash, outspoken, perpetually single by choice. What's the secret? New coffee? Or finally telling Michael you hate that hideous painting he bought last month? Sarah laughed, a genuine sound that surprised her. Neither. I'm going to Paris for the tech conference next month. Lisa's eyes widened. No way. You lucky thing. I heard Jacques Dubois is speaking there. The artist? His installations are incredible, huge immersive pieces that play with light and shadow. They say he's brilliant but impossible to work with. Sarah's smile faltered slightly. Jack Du Bois. The name stirred something in her memory, a ghost from her art history classes at the Sorbonne. She'd written a paper on contemporary French artists once, and his work had fascinated her, the way he transformed ordinary spaces into emotional landscapes. I didn't know he was involved, she said carefully. Get a selfie with him, Lisa grinned. Post it on Instagram. Make Michael jealous. The comment hit too close to home. Sarah forced another laugh. I'll be working, not sightseeing. But that night, as she lay beside Michael in their king-sized bed, listening to his steady breathing, she found herself thinking about Jack Du Bois, about art, passion, the life she might have chosen if she'd followed her heart instead of her head all those years ago. The flight to Paris was smooth, the first-class cabin cocooning her in comfort as the plane descended through clouds into Charles de Gaulle Airport. As she stepped off the plane, the familiar scent of Gallas's cigarettes and fresh baguettes hit her senses, instantly transporting her back to her 20-year-old self. Paris hadn't changed much in 15 years, the same elegant women in tailored coats, the same café terraces spilling onto narrow streets, the same effortless blend of history and modernity that made the city pulse with life. Her hotel, the Hotel de Crillon, was everything she remembered from her studies: opulent marble floors, crystal chandeliers, staff who addressed her as Madame Mitchell with genuine warmth. Her room overlooked the Place de la Concorde, the obelisk standing sentinel against the grey Parisian sky. She unpacked quickly, hanging her business suits in the spacious closet, arranging her toiletries on the marble bathroom counter. The contrast between this elegant space and her Chicago apartment felt jarring, exciting. The conference began the next morning at the Palais des Congrès, a gleaming modern structure that housed hundreds of tech professionals from around the world. Sarah delivered her presentation flawlessly, her French flowing naturally as she demonstrated their new software platform. The audience responded well, particularly the European clients who appreciated her linguistic fluency. During the networking lunch, she found herself surrounded by potential business partners, discussing market trends and cultural differences in digital marketing. It was during a coffee break on the second day that she saw him. Jack Du Bois stood near a floor-to-ceiling window, his silhouette sharp against the Paris skyline. He was taller than she'd imagined, with salt and pepper hair that fell artfully over his forehead, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that looked like it had been made specifically for his lean frame, the jacket open to reveal a crisp white shirt. But it was his hands that caught her attention, long-fingered, expressive, moving as he spoke with a group of admirers. Sarah felt a jolt of recognition, not just from his appearance but from the intensity that radiated from him. This was a man who lived his art, who carried his passion in every gesture. She hung back, observing from a distance, until one of the conference organizers approached her. Sarah, I'd like you to meet Jack Du Bois. He's creating an installation for our closing gala tomorrow night, and I thought you two might have some interesting things to discuss: art and technology, bridging the gap between the two worlds. Before she could protest, she was being led across the room. Jack turned as they approached, his gaze meeting hers. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, as if he sensed something familiar about her too. Madame Mitchell, he said, his voice deep and accented, extending his hand. I've heard about your presentation. The Americans are finally learning to make technology with soul. Sarah laughed, surprised. That's kind of you to say. I've admired your work for years. Your piece at the Pompidou last year, the one with light and water, it stayed with me. His eyes lit up. You saw Lumière Liquide? Few Americans make it to those exhibitions. He studied her face more closely. You have the look of someone who understands art, not just appreciates it. Have we met before? Sarah felt her cheeks warm. I studied art history at the Sorbonne years ago. Before I went into marketing. Ah, he said, the single syllable rich with understanding. The Sorbonne changes people. Or perhaps it reveals who they truly are. He glanced at his watch. I must prepare for the installation. But perhaps you would join me for a drink tonight? Not as business, but as fellow travelers who once loved this city. The invitation hung in the air, dangerous and exhilarating. Sarah thought of Michael, of the time difference, of the text she should send him. But something in Jack's gaze held her, a promise of connection, of being truly seen. "I'd like that," she heard herself say. That evening, Sarah dressed carefully in a simple black dress she'd packed for the gala, applying makeup with a steadier hand than she felt. She met Jack at Le Bristol, a classic Parisian hotel bar with plush velvet chairs and crystal glasses that caught the light. The moment she walked in, she saw him waiting at a corner table, a bottle of Bordeaux already open. "You came," he said simply, rising to greet her. "I did," she replied, sliding into the seat opposite him. The conversation flowed effortlessly. They spoke of art and technology, of Paris then and now, of the compromises we make as we grow older. Jack was brilliant but not pretentious. He laughed easily, listened intently, and when he spoke about his art, his passion was contagious. He told her about growing up in Marseille, about losing his father young, about how art had become his language when words failed him. "And you?" he asked, swirling his wine. "What language do you speak now, Sarah Mitchell? The language of marketing? Or something deeper?" The question pierced through her carefully constructed professional persona. "I don't know anymore," she admitted quietly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life. A good life, a safe life, but not entirely mine." Jack leaned forward, his gaze intense. "This city has a way of reminding us who we are. Not who we've become, but who we were before the world told us to be practical, responsible, safe." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers briefly. "You still have fire in you. I can see it. Don't let anyone extinguish it." The words resonated deep within her, touching a part of herself she'd buried beneath years of sensible choices. When they left the bar hours later, the Parisian night alive around them, Jack walked her back to her hotel. At the entrance, he took her hand again. "Tomorrow night, at the gala, I'll show you my installation. It's about choices, about the roads not taken. I think you'll understand it." Sarah nodded, her heart pounding. "I'll be there." That night, lying in her luxurious hotel bed, Sarah couldn't sleep. She thought about Michael, about his kindness, his reliability, the life they'd built together. She thought about Jack, his intensity, his passion, the way he made her feel alive again. She texted Michael, her fingers trembling slightly, "Conference going well. Paris is beautiful. Miss you." The response came quickly, "Good to hear. Working late again. Be safe." The guilt gnawed at her, but so did the excitement. For the first time in years, she felt like she was standing at a crossroads, and she wasn't sure which path to take. The gala was held in a converted warehouse in the Marais district, the space transformed by Jack's installation. As Sarah entered, she caught her breath. The room was dark except for strategically placed lights that created shifting patterns on the walls and floor. In the center stood a series of mirrors arranged at angles, reflecting the viewers in fragmented, distorted images. The effect was disorienting, mesmerizing. Jack found her almost immediately, his eyes bright with pride. "What do you think?" "It's incredible," she whispered. "It feels like looking into different versions of yourself." "Exactly," he said, leading her through the installation. "We all carry multiple selves inside us. The person we are at work, at home, in love. The person we were, the person we might have been. The mirrors show us these fragments, but the light," he gestured to the shifting patterns, "that's the choices that connect them." Sarah stopped before one mirror that reflected her face in a way that made her look both younger and older at the same time. "It's beautiful but sad," she said. "All these versions of ourselves, never quite whole." Jack stood beside her, their reflections overlapping in the glass. Life is about choosing which version to embrace. Sometimes we choose safety. Sometimes we choose truth. He turned to face her directly. "Which will you choose, Sarah?" The question hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Sarah looked away, her heart racing. The professional conference, the business contacts, the reason she was in Paris, all of it faded into the background. In this moment, there was only Jack, the installation, and the terrifying possibility of change. Later, as the gala wound down and guests began to leave, Jack took her hand. "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." He led her to his studio, a converted attic space in Montmartre, filled with canvases, sculptures, and the smell of oil paint. The city lights spread out below them through large skylights. Jack poured them glasses of wine and sat on a worn sofa, patting the space beside him. "Tell me about your husband," he said quietly. Sarah hesitated, then began to speak, about meeting Michael at a friend's wedding, about their early years together, about the comfort and security he provided. "He's a good man," she said finally. "He loves me. I love him too, in my way." "But?" Jack prompted gently. "But sometimes love isn't enough," she admitted. "Sometimes you need to feel alive, to feel like you're not just going through the motions." She looked around the studio, at the evidence of a life lived passionately. "You understand that, don't you?" Jack nodded. "I've made many choices in my life. Some were practical. Some were true. The practical ones kept me fed. The true ones kept me alive." He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You have a choice to make, Sarah. Not just about me, but about who you want to be." The intensity of his gaze, the intimacy of the space, the wine, all of it dissolved her resistance. When he kissed her, it wasn't a calculated decision but a surrender to something deeper, something she'd been denying for years. The kiss was soft at first, then deepened, filled with the promise of transformation. Afterward, lying in his arms amid the chaos of his studio, Sarah felt both terrified and exhilarated. "I can't stay," she whispered. "My flight is tomorrow afternoon." Jack stroked her hair. "I know. But this isn't goodbye. This is just the beginning of your choice." The next morning, Sarah packed her bags with trembling hands. She avoided looking at her phone, knowing Michael would have texted, knowing the guilt would crush her if she let it. At the airport, waiting for her flight, she finally checked her messages. 12 texts from Michael, all variations of "hope your flight's on time, did you enjoy the gala, and can't wait to see you tonight." She typed back, "Flight delayed. We'll be home late. So much to tell you." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. When she arrived home that evening, Michael was waiting with takeout from their favorite Thai restaurant and a bottle of her favorite wine. "Welcome home," he said, pulling her into a tight hug. "I missed you." Sarah buried her face in his shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of his cologne, feeling the solidity of his embrace. "I missed you too," she said, the words catching in her throat. That night, as they lay in bed, Michael asleep beside her, Sarah stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed silently on the nightstand, a message from Jacques, "Paris misses you. I miss you. When will you choose?" She silenced the phone, her heart torn between two worlds, two lives, two versions of herself. The choice Jacques had spoken of wasn't just about him or Michael, it was about who she wanted to become. And she knew, with a certainty that chilled her, that she couldn't keep both lives forever. Secrets had a way of surfacing, and when they did, they destroyed everything in their path. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in compartmentalization. By day, Sarah was the perfect wife and professional, attending meetings, planning Michael's surprise birthday party, discussing their plans to finally start trying for a baby that year. By night, she and Jack exchanged messages across time zones, their digital intimacy growing deeper even as their physical distance remained. He sent her photos of his latest works in progress, she shared snippets of her life in Chicago that she thought he'd understand, the frustration of corporate politics, the beauty of Lake Michigan in winter. Michael noticed nothing. Or if he did, he chose not to see. He was focused on his own career advancement, on building the life they'd always planned. One Saturday morning, as they browsed a farmer's market in Lincoln Park, he took her hand. "I was thinking about that house in Evanston we looked at last month. The one with the big backyard. What if we put an offer on it? Start our family there." Sarah forced a smile, squeezing his hand. That sounds perfect. But her mind was in Paris, in Jacques' studio, in a life she was beginning to crave more than her own. The breaking point came unexpectedly. Sarah's company announced another European conference, in Barcelona this time. When her boss asked her to attend, she didn't hesitate. Of course, she said, already composing messages to Jacques in her head, telling him she'd arrange a side trip to Paris. But Michael had other plans. I thought we could use that weekend for a getaway, he said that evening over dinner. Just us. Remember that bed and breakfast in Door County we always talked about? Sarah's heart sank. I have to go to Barcelona for work, Michael. It's important for my career. Michael's face fell. Again? You just got back from Paris. Can't someone else go this time? The frustration in his voice sparked something defensive in her. This is my job, Michael. These opportunities don't come around often. I can't just pass them up because you want a weekend away. They argued for the first time in years, about priorities, about time, about the growing distance between them. Michael accused her of being distant, preoccupied. Sarah accused him of not understanding her ambitions. The fight ended with Michael sleeping on the couch and Sarah lying awake in bed, tears streaming down her face. The next morning, Michael was gone when she woke up. On the kitchen counter, he'd left a note, gone to the office early. We need to talk tonight. I love you. Sarah's phone buzzed. A message from Jacques, I can't keep waiting in the shadows, Sarah. Come to Paris. Choose me. Choose yourself. She stared at the two messages, the note from her husband, the text from her lover, and realized she couldn't straddle these worlds any longer. That afternoon, she called her boss and requested the time off for Barcelona. Then she booked a flight to Paris. The decision felt both terrifying and inevitable. As the plane took off from O'Hare, Sarah thought about Michael, about his kindness, his patience, the life they'd built together. She thought about the baby they'd planned, the house in Evanston, the future that now felt like a cage. And she thought about Jacques and about the way he saw her, truly saw her, the person she might become if she had the courage to choose differently. In Paris, Jacques met her at the airport, his face lighting up when he saw her. You came, he said simply, pulling her into his arms. I came, she replied, breathing in the scent of paint and turpentine that clung to his coat. For 3 days, they lived in a bubble, walking along the Seine, making love in his studio, talking late into the night about art, life, the future. Jacques showed her his city through the eyes of an artist, the hidden courtyards of Montmartre, the pre-dawn light on Notre Dame, the way the Parisians argued passionately about politics in corner cafes. Sarah felt alive in a way she hadn't in years, as if she'd been sleepwalking through her life until now. On the third night, as they sat on the floor of his studio surrounded by half-finished canvases, Jacques took her hands. Stay with me, he said. Not just for a weekend. For real. I have gallery shows in New York next year. I can set up a studio there. We can build something together. Sarah's heart raced. What about Michael? What about my job in Chicago? Those are not lives, Sarah, Jacques said gently. They are routines. You have a soul that needs to breathe. I can see it every time you walk into a room. Don't suffocate it for the sake of comfort. The words resonated deep within her. She thought of Michael's kind but increasingly distant face, of the life that had begun to feel like a performance. I need to tell him, she said finally. Properly. In person. Jacques nodded. Do what you need to do. I'll be here when you're ready. Sarah returned to Chicago the next day with a heavy heart but a clear mind. She would tell Michael the truth, end their marriage with honesty, and then choose the life that made her feel alive. It wasn't fair to anyone, not to Michael, not to Jacques, not to herself, to continue living a lie. But when she arrived home, the apartment was empty. Michael's note on the counter read, Gone to stay with my brother. We need to talk when you're ready. I found your messages. Sarah's blood ran cold. She rushed to her phone, scrolling through her deleted messages, her private emails. Everything was exposed. Michael had seen it all: the late-night texts with Jack, the intimate photos, the travel bookings to Paris. He'd seen the life she'd been building in secret, the betrayal that went far deeper than a physical affair. When Michael returned 3 days later, the man who stood in their living room was not the husband she knew. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face drawn. "How long?" he asked quietly, his voice raw. Sarah told him everything: the conference in Paris, meeting Jack, the growing connection, the impossible choice she'd been trying to make. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, tears streaming down her face. I felt like I was disappearing, and I didn't know how to come back." Michael listened silently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he shook his head slowly. "You didn't just disappear, Sarah. You erased us. Our plans, our dreams, the life we built together. Did you ever think about what this would do to me? To us?" The truth of his words hit her like a physical blow. In her quest to find herself, she destroyed the person who loved her most. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Michael sighed, the sound heavy with grief. "Sorry isn't enough. I need time. Space. I've packed a bag. I'll stay with my brother until we figure this out." He paused at the door. "I loved you, Sarah. I still do, in some way. But I don't know if I can trust you again. And without trust..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. In the weeks that followed, Sarah moved through her life like a ghost. She called Jack, telling him what had happened, that she needed time to sort through the wreckage of her marriage before making any more choices. He understood, but there was a new distance in his voice, a recognition that their perfect bubble had been punctured by reality. Michael filed for divorce. The process was civil but painful, each conversation a reminder of what they'd lost. Sarah moved out of their apartment, renting a small studio in Wicker Park, surrounded by the vibrant street art that had always drawn her but that Michael had found too chaotic. One evening, as she walked along the Chicago Riverwalk, watching the sunset paint the skyscrapers in shades of gold and pink, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was Jack. "I'm in New York for a show. I thought you might want to see the installation. It's about forgiveness." Sarah hesitated. Part of her wanted to run back into his arms, to escape the pain of her choices. But another part, the part that had been buried for too long, knew she needed to face the consequences before she could move forward. "I can't," she said finally. "I need to fix what I broke first. Or at least try to understand why I broke it." There was silence on the line, then Jack's soft laugh. "Perhaps that's the most honest thing you've said since we met. Go find your truth, Sarah. Wherever it leads you." After hanging up, Sarah continued her walk, the city lights beginning to twinkle around her. She thought about Michael, not with guilt anymore, but with a deep sadness for what they'd lost. She thought about Jack, about the passion he'd awakened in her. And she thought about herself, about the choices she'd made, the person she'd become, and the person she still might be. The path ahead wasn't clear. There would be no easy answers, no perfect endings. But for the first time in years, Sarah felt a sense of possibility, not the reckless passion of Paris, but the quiet understanding that life was about choices, and sometimes the most important choice was learning to live with the consequences. She stopped at a bench overlooking the river, watching a couple walk hand in hand along the path. Trust, she realized, wasn't just about fidelity, it was about showing up, day after day, for the person you claimed to love. It was about choosing them, even when the spark dimmed, even when the routine felt suffocating. And when you failed, when you broke that trust, the road to redemption was long and uncertain. Sarah took a deep breath of the cool Chicago air. She didn't know if she and Michael could ever rebuild what they'd lost. She didn't know if Jack would wait for her to find herself. But she knew this much: she would no longer hide from her choices. She would face them head-on, with honesty and courage, even when it hurt. The sun had set completely now, the city illuminated by artificial light. Sarah stood up, ready to face whatever came next. The journey ahead would be difficult, but it would be hers, truly, authentically hers. And that, she realized, was the most precious gift of all. The end.